So
Yeah,
Stephan,
yeah.
great to meet you. I always like to start. I mean, I feel like a lot of my listeners are really all over the map. So from the world of education, some are music enthusiasts, some are just casual listeners. So I'd like to bring everybody in and ask you to just start by introducing yourself and what it is that you do and just a little bit about yourself.
I'm Stephan Gelfas, and I am a musician and composer and producer. Uh, and I've done that my whole life. My God, a long
That's
time.
great.
So, and I'm not like real big on kind of hyping myself, but if anybody does Google, there's so much stuff I've done. It's really hard to pick out like what exactly, but I music when I was young, and I guess my first professional gig, I guess, 13 or 14 years old, in a little band. And I'm from down in Georgia, and in a little band, and also playing in church.
Right.
And playing in church was the most important single thing for me for influence. Uh, and
Is your principal
then
instrument guitar?
the principal instruments, guitar,
Yeah.
guitar and bass, but really guitar. But all kinds of all country sort of music things like a mandolin and mandocello and dulcimer and banjo and all of those sort of
Right.
Georgia country hillbilly instruments. So I got very fortunate. I got kind of known locally and in the church circuit as a musician from being very young, and that helped. And then in high school, I had continued to play, making a local name for myself. But what does that mean down in the hills of Georgia? A local name is, some cows know you, some sheep know you, and your friends know you. And you play at church socials, which have the same 18 people,
Right.
but you play every Friday, so you're famous.
Right.
But then I got a scholarship to New York University,
Nice.
and out of the blue for playing baseball. And I got to New York, and you got to understand, small town Georgia, New York, big change. This is the late 60s in Greenwich Village.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you were living in the village near the school. Yeah.
Yeah, well, when you're on a scholarship, they always mandate that you have to have dorms.
Mm-hmm.
They want to keep track of you and make sure you actually go to class and do all that stuff, which I found ways of getting out of, because all I wanted to do then was, so now I'm down in the village in the end of the 60s. Now, people historically, I don't know how many people are still alive that could remember that, but that was a time when music was exploding down there. You Dylan, Peter, Paul, and Mary, you had all these people that were Joan Baez, Arlo Guthrie, all of the Pete Seeger, all of the stars of Americana folk music, because folk music was big, and it was just beginning to have those other bands like the Lovin' Spoonful, and there were also beginning where folk was getting a rock and edge to it.
Yeah.
And this is prior to Bob Dylan going electric,
right?
Which was like sacrilege. I mean, it's hard to imagine now what an impact that made, but when he did that, it was like international news.
Yes, yes.
Now, nobody would give a shit.
Yeah.
And who cares?
So you're in the middle of like the Bleecker Street scene.
Yeah, and NYU is right down there. Yeah. So I'm down there 24/7, and I learned that I liked playing more than class. And I got known pretty quickly because I could play I was this perfect stepping stone between this folk music and this rock influence, because I played both and I played all the folk stuff. So I got to play with people like Peter, Paul, and Mary, and I got to play. And I met through gigging with Bob Dylan, and in the background, he played Gertie's Folk City and guitar. I mean, I would just hire pickup gigs to play with these people who they were just an endless array of them. It wasn't like anything that was memorable for them or me, because these weren't super famous. It was just the circuit. We all knew each other, and I got found out, I guess, by producers in New York that I could play almost anything, and I had a good ear. So I started getting hired as a session player, and this was just when session players were beginning. And my reputation kind of spread, and it spread to the point where I got an introductory meeting set up, because this guy, Albert Grossman, who managed Peter, Paul, and Mary, and Bob Dylan, and Janis Joplin, and the band.
And owned Bearsville Studios.
Yes, and owned Bearsville Studios. Yeah. He owned all of Woodstock and Bearsville. It's like he owned it all. And he kind of he discovered me. And through quirks of fate, got introduced to people at Warner Brothers Records. And lo and behold, a few months later, I was made the first East staff producer for Warner. So I went from like hanging out and playing in the folk scene to a staff producer at Warner.
Very nice.
In a very short amount of time. And the reason being that Warner was looking to go into a more rock world. This was when Warner and Reprise had just joined together. So our biggest selling artists at the time were Frank Sinatra and Peter, Paul, and Mary.
I was just going to say, wasn't Reprise Frank Sinatra's label?
Yep. It was Frank Sinatra and Joe Smith and Mo Austin. And at that time, Teddy Templeman, Lenny Waronker, they were producers. Myself, so here I come from this folk country rock background, and the first major album that I produced was Peter Yarrow, That's Enough for Me.
Oh wow! Was that his first solo album?
Yeah. So that's Peter, Paul, Mary. So that was the first record that I did, and it got amazing response. And I also toured with him, playing, and so it kind of solidified my name and gave me some latitudes. And this kind of brings us up to the point at which the Good Rats enter. So now I've done Peter Yarrow's album, and there was a guy who worked at Warner in promotion, I believe. His name was Mike Oliveri. And Mike Oliveri was, I believe, kind of managing the Good Rats at this time. So he told me, I have to come see this band. Got to come see this band. And so now I'm a staff producer, and I don't have much time to do anything because I'm working at Sesame Street.
Can I just interrupt here? So for those, if we just take a step back, the Good Rats had an album out before this time. Are you in like the early 70s right here?
Yeah.
And had you known of the Good Rats at this point, or was this your first introduction to them?
It was here's what I knew about the Good Rats. They had a billboard on the West Side Highway for this album, the first album, which is called Good Rats.
Yeah.
So I was aware of the band because I was music aficionado, like every type of music, classical, country, funk. It didn't matter to me. I liked it all. I liked for different reasons. And I liked the idea of being a producer and a session player because I always wanted to be behind the scenes. I had no interest in fame, stardom. I wanted to be in the background. And I liked too many different types of music to get stuck in a band.
Right.
Because I've been in bands before and they were limited to what I wrote or the other band wrote. And so it's limiting to me. And I wasn't good at it. I wasn't good at sticking to one thing because I got bored. You know,
right.
Remember, I was very young at this time, in my teens. And so the Good Rats get presented to me. I'd known about them, and I had heard the first record of tracks of it, and it was okay. I thought the lead singer sounded way too much like Burton Cummings from the Guess Who.
That's a very good likeness analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I thought, I thought there were just identity issues. It was like they were trying to figure out who they were because they had fragments of interesting stuff. Do you know the original record?
Yes, not very well, but because I knew that I was going to be speaking with you, I went back to it and listened to it again.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I mean, there are good things about it, but it overall just didn't impress me. There wasn't decide what they were, nor were they varied enough to be called, multi. And it just was. I think later I understood it was a problem of production. That's nobody had been there to pick and guide. So anyway, I got Mike Oliveri finally got me and convinced me to go with him to see them doing a show out at Long Island, a place called My Father's Place. And I think that was in Baldwin, Long Island. And I went out and they were like almost a house band there. And I came out and was like religious furor around this band, and I'm watching them and it's okay. It's loud and the PA sucks and the acoustics are terrible. And, about 5-6 songs in, they start throwing rubber rats out. And I'm like,
which became a signature of theirs.
Yeah, but it's all a little cheesy to me.
Yeah.
And I'm very authentic. I'm like coming from authentic Americana music, and that's my background is like, Woody Guthrie was a hero of mine, Pete Seeger. I mean, these are my heroes with these great songwriters. But about 2/3 or 3/4 of the way into the show, they play a song called Songwriter. And that did it for me. That was like all this crap and then this amazing piece.
Yes.
It's like, wow. So
it's a ballad for those who this is on the album Tasty, correct?
Yeah.
And it's a ballad, one of Pepe's ballads, right?
Yeah. It's a ballad, and it's about what it seems, songwriter. It's about being a songwriter, and great lines in it. Songwriters talks about pumping gas at night just to survive, and it was autobiographical. And this was Pepe. This was truth. And I thought, I always looked for truth, and that's when it got me. So I decided to stick around a little bit and went backstage, and I met the group. And there were two brothers who really dominated it. Pepe, the lead singer, and Mickey did background vocals and played guitar. And they were really the dominant forces in the band. Followed by, I'd say the third most important, Joe Franco, the drummer. He was very musically influential in the band too, an incredible drummer.
Yep.
I mean, that I noticed. Joe and I are still in touch. He's still a great drummer. He's still an amazing talent. He's just one of those gifted heavy drummers, you know.
Yeah.
And became friends with them over time. But I got interested, and so basically set up a rehearsal to go to rehearsal. And in the rehearsal, I began to hear fragments of these great songs, just great. And you know, we started working on arrangements. We didn't do a great deal of rehearsal before me deciding that I wanted to sign this act.
Mm-hmm.
So I had the power to sign acts at Warner. And when I came up and I brought it up at a meeting that now remember, Frank Sinatra's label, Peter, Paul, and Mary, and I'm bringing up this band, the Good Rats, and
you got to pitch them in a meeting.
Yes, and with all due respect, at this point in time, bands were really cute. You know, they were like the boy band era that came about later. So this was prior to where there could be a Jethro Tull or you could be ugly and be in a band. It wasn't.
Right.
Cute was really important. So the Good Rats, I guess the politest thing to say is they weren't exactly cute. Okay? These are not boys you brought home to meet your mother.
Yeah.
Okay? No, these are people you wouldn't want to meet in a back alley.
Did you get to, but before we get to this point where you're pitching them to the label, did you get to know them enough to kind of suss out like who they were? What were they doing? Were they working odd jobs? Were they living in Long Island? Were they piecing it together? I mean, what was the scenario?
They were living in Long Island. They were making money at the clubs, but they were just playing Long Island. Mm-hmm. That's it. But they were a phenomenon in Long Island. You know, they were, at this time, it was the Good Rats. There was the Hassles, which is Billy Joel's band. And there were a couple of other, Twisted Sister had not yet really, it was just a little bit before Twisted Sister. Mm-hmm. So it was this Long Island scene and a very incestuous scene of competitive love-hate among the groups, and all vying for a slice of a real limited market. It's just Long Island. Right. And that ended up being one of the worst things and best things for the Good Rats.
I'd like to circle back to that point. So
yeah, we'll go back to that later. Yeah. So I pitched them, and the response, to say tepid would have been an exaggeration beyond belief. It was just blank.
What songs were on the demo? Did you have to? Was there a listening session?
Yeah. There was Songwriter. There was Fireball Express. There was Engine Joe and 300 Boys. I believe those are the ones.
All great songs.
Yeah. But, 300 Boys was a bizarre song about basically pedophilia.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
I'd like to ask you about that as well. But yeah. It's slightly creepy, but an anthemic, a rock anthemic song, right?
Oh yeah. And powerful and way ahead of its time, and exposing this Pepe's view, because Pepe wrote all the songs.
Yeah.
And his view of life was different. And he was very bold at this time, talking about, way out of its time, about pedophilia in schools and churches, and, a powerful song. But remember, this is a time of cute bands, the Beach Boys, and this is and now I'm bringing a band that's got Engine Joe, Fireball Express,
right,
And I mean, Injun Joe, just the INJUN already extraordinarily offensive.
Yes. Yes.
300 boys. And so they were not, Pepe didn't write for the critics. He wrote for himself. He wrote for his own view. And so the response was extremely bad. The meeting was like, no, no, no. So there was a bit more lobbying. And finally, as part of my deal, I had the right to, I didn't have to get approval to sign an act. Dangerous to go that route, very dangerous. But sometimes it was like, and this is the beginning of my career.
Right.
So my first album I produced is Peter Yarrow, and gets all this incredible response and sells huge. And so, okay, now album number 2 I'm going to do for Warner is The Good Rats.
It's tasty, tasty by the Good Rats. Yes.
Yeah. So I decide to follow my convictions, and I sign them, make a deal, and The Good Rats are part of the Warner label. And we went in and we began to record Tasty. So a process that from me meeting him till signing is probably, I can't remember exactly, but probably 3 to 6 months. It took some time. It took some time to get it done. So, but in that time, I got to know Pepe more and to know more of the songs and to appreciate what he was about and the honesty as a musician and a songwriter. And also, I got very close with Mickey, his brother, younger brother, who was very instrumental in arrangements and the guitar arrangements, and he was the antithesis of he very cultured, very into collecting antiques.
Oh wow!
Finals and no, just
sounds like they're from different families.
Oh yeah, different worlds. But they were a tight Italian family. 2 brothers fought, and we'll get into the fighting aspects of the Good Rats because
I want to know about it.
Yeah, they had no problem fighting. And so we began Tasty, and Tasty was a challenging record to make.
Where did you guys record that?
At my studio, House of Music in West Orange.
That was your studio?
Yeah.
So did you live in West Orange?
No.
Oh, wow. So
no, I lived in, at that time I was living in Tuxedo Park, New York.
Okay.
And then I moved out of the city and moved up to Tuxedo Park because the city had become too much. When you're working in the city and living in the city, it was just too much for me. I needed some space. Yes. So I got a place in Tuxedo Park that was for my weekends, but I ended up staying. I had a place in New York, but I ended up staying in Tuxedo Park. And then the 2 places became too disparate, and I moved to Edgewater, and it was directly across from the George Washington Bridge from New York. So that I was really living in New York again. And the Good Rats were commuting from Long Island to West Orange.
Every day.
Yeah, we recorded every day, and that's a long schlep. That's an hour and a half drive each way. But I had the advantage of being in my studio that I could take as long as I wanted. So we began making the record, and they really didn't have studio chops. They had live performance chops, and the studio recording is than live performance. It's real different. And we're at a time now that there had not been any heavy rock and roll records. there really hadn't been anything as heavy as the Good Rats coming from New York. Other things were circling around like Vanilla Fudge, but you had groups like the Rascals, and they weren't heavy like the Good Rats.
Indeed, yeah.
So, and the Good Rats were very New York. I mean, very. They were definitely not a West Coast band. And so we, in the studio, began the creative process with the struggles and fights, and because they can be very difficult as far as accepting direction. They had in their mind, when I say they, Pepe, very strong-willed, a genius, but very strong-willed, and rightfully so. That's his song, his life's work, and his big opportunity. And they had trust issues because they'd been screwed like every young band gets screwed.
Right.
They'd been screwed around. They'd had a record come out, and instead of fame and fortune, nothing happened. And so now they're going at second shot at it, which at that time bands didn't get that.
And this was 5 years later, by the way, too. So some time had passed.
Oh yeah, it's 5 years later. Yeah, nobody cared about them. Because the first record was interesting, but it wasn't really heavy.
Yeah.
You know, it was kind of mishmashy. Somebody tried to water them down to make them more acceptable. And you didn't have the heavy guitar and guitar arrangements, and you know, you just didn't have. And what appealed about Pepe in his writing was the incredible breadth of his influences, from Gershwin, Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. Every rock and roll band, Jethro Tull, he was very influenced by Jethro Tull. Burton Cummings, believe it or not, was also, because there's no denying that Pepe's voice and Burton Cummings' voice had same vibrato, same nasal tonality, same, you know, both great singers in different ways. Pepe a little bit harder, but there were similarities.
What did Pepe play? What was his medium to write and communicate?
He played two-finger piano.
Okay.
He couldn't really play an instrument. He wrote the songs and melodies, etc., in his head, and then he'd have basic ideas, and then Mickey would get involved to embellish on those chords and the structures.
So to drill down, what like how would a song come about? Would he crystallize this idea in his head, sing it to his brother while he's playing two-finger piano, and Mickey would flesh out the chords and the changes built underneath?
Yeah.
Because some of the harmonic changes are very advanced.
Yes. Well, some of those, I mean, you know, I did contribute to some of those.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, I mean, because I saw this Gershwin thing, and I was a big Gershwin fan, and so was Pepe, and so I thought, okay, let's add some of this. And Mickey had this amazing ear for harmony, and if you listen to some of the guitar harmony, some of it is straight out of the sort of Gershwin era of songwriting, you know, these incredible harmonics that were like from big band jazz.
Yes.
Many of the guitar chords we worked on to kind of sound like more like horns, you know, like big band horn arrangements.
You know, that's one thing that I can't, the only other genre that I can think of that used guitars like that would be Southern rock. That relied on guitars in that way, but it's something that I miss hearing from arrangements in any type of music is the use of guitars in that way. And for the life of me, if people are always going back to reference, what they should be, youngsters should be referencing this kind of.
Yeah, but you know, the guitar has taken a strange position now. Like guitar used to be the forefront of rock and roll, and now it's not.
Yeah.
It just isn't. It's like, what pop music is today it's very limited. We start looking and talking about what a gifted songwriter Taylor Swift is. Excuse
Mm-hmm.
me.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, he, I mean, God bless her, she's talented and all, but this is not any new ground being broken.
Yeah.
This is not, you know what I mean? Where it's very, it's pablum. You know what I mean?
Right.
It is just bland, and it's tried to make accessible to the masses, and
Right.
it seems very premeditated and constructed.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
because when I've made every record I've made, the huge hits and the ones that weren't so big, I approach them all the same, and I never approached a record trying to make a hit record.
Right.
Never. I always tried to make a great record. That's what I wanted. Just make the best record I could with what I had, which were these players. With Good Rats, I had some incredible talent between John the Cat, John Gatto,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, and Mickey. I mean,
So is Mickey
guitar
aware
player.
at this time? Is he cognizant of how he's using the guitar instrumentally, or are you helping him along? Are you kind of sitting there coaching him to come out with this?
Yeah. We definitely. It was very collaborative. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? I'm definitely pushing ideas out to him and expanding. But once he got in his brain the possibilities, and that when we recorded guitars, it would be Pep would be around, but he'd get bored, so it'd be just me and Mickey in the
Mm-hmm.
studio. And then Mickey saw this freedom, and he began to go with it. And so once the doors were open for him to be told, you can do this, you've got the freedom to do what you want here. He bit. And John the Cat could play anything, but the arrangements came primarily from Mickey. I mean, certainly John had some input in some of the harmonies and everything, but mostly Mickey had it worked out.
Did the whole band stay for all the tracking? What was it those days, or did they all split after?
No, everybody in that band came to every session,
Wow,
even if they were just hanging out. Yeah,
that's
this is
great.
before. Yeah, nowadays bands come up, one guy comes in, and
Yeah.
they don't talk to each other. They don't even see that. They're busy with their lives. Um, but no, they were there. They were very committed as a band to being a band. They were proud of being the Good Rats. And somewhere in the middle of doing all this, we realized we had a special record. It was, and when we got done with the record, and the record took some time. I think the record took like 3 or 4 months to make.
Wow.
Yeah, so a long time. Those guitar parts took a long time. So, and back then, you have to understand, back then, budgets for rock and roll records not such that you got 3 or 4 months in the studio. So we went way over budget, and I had to do all kinds of manipulation with Warner to conceal that so I could keep my job as a producer.
Mm-hmm.
I used up my demo budget. I used up other things. I gave away a ton of time. Because I saw that this was a classic record, that we had a chance for something really special. And when it was done and it came out, New York had just had a station begin called WNEW
Mm-hmm.
that was playing rock and roll.
It began as an AM station and then moved over to FM, right?
Yeah, and when it became WNEW FM,
Mm-hmm.
WNEW AM played Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
And went over there, and became one of the first in the country to play album rock. That's what their focus was, album rock. So the timing was really good. And long story short, I'm jumping ahead a bit, WNEW called it the album of the year for them.
Wow.
Like, whoa.
What was the single? What was the first single on that record?
My gosh. I, I, I got to tell you, it may have been Fireball Express.
Mm-hmm.
It may have been that. Uh, we had Four Songwriter was a single from there. Injun Joe was a single.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Back to My Music.
Back to My Music, yes. And Tasty.
Yes.
And the biggest song, which was a very bizarre arrangement that we spent a lot of time on, because it was the one song in the record that was not heavy, except in the moments when it needed to be heavy. It was all these jazz guitars, and then they got a guitar player in the band, and they let him play. And so, bam! And these are all real people. This all of Tasty's true.
For
Tasty. Yeah.
I read on someone's blog that they knew the Crazy Art, that they knew
Yeah.
Crazy Art, who owned a record store somewhere in Long Island, and they would go in and like harass him,
Yes.
because he
yeah.
he ended. For those of you who haven't heard of it, so Crazy Art is a character in the song Tasty. So
yeah.
who ends up being let go from the band.
Yeah, they were the album was autobiographical with all real people. I mean, this was all real. Everything in there was real.
Right.
Everything, every bit of it. And I found that extremely appealing to me because it was kind of like early Americana music.
Yeah.
Like Pete Seeger or like any of those people where they were Woody Guthrie, that they were it was truth that they were writing, their vision of truth, and Bob Dylan, and I saw Pepe doing that in a different way than other rock and roll bands are doing.
So as they're tracking, is he ever referencing other bands? Like, I want this song to sound like X or Y, or are they just going for it?
I very early on, whenever I produced a band, and they would bring in albums that they liked the way they sound and wanted it to sound like that, I early on tell them, well, if you want to sound like this band, here's the phone number of their producer and their manager. So you get all the guys in that band,
yeah,
you get their producer, you teach the band their song, and then you got it. So I more than discouraged that. Some things, like we have quotes, we have bits of Rhapsody in Blue, we have bits of of other songs that are in there.
Right, you've got nods to other genres, and
especially in Tasty, and that's
Are there songs you left off the record? Did you record more than 10?
No.
So you had 10, and did the band have more than 10 songs?
Yes, a lot more.
So they had a lot. So you picked through them to help them decide which ones you're going to record.
Yeah, I kind of looked at it as, I started with them with the idea of, let me plan for 2 albums. So here would be the first album, and then the second album, we could go heavier. But let's get an album to introduce them. So I kind of planned out 2 albums. That was little did I know, albums later I'd still be banging away with the Good Rats. It's like, but the sessions were intense, exhausting. They were long, and I mean long. We'd work forever.
Did you engineer too, or did you have somebody else come in?
Yeah, I engineered too. Yeah.
So that's a topic of a different conversation. That you come in, you're an instrumental, you're a guitar player on Bleecker Street, and then now you're running a Neve console and in your own studio.
Yeah. It's like, and I had another guy, Jeff Kowalik, who engineered with me.
I know Jeff.
Do you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He used to work at a studio that I did sessions at in the 80s, where they did like karaoke tracks on 46th Street.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that part of him. That had to be after House of Music, because he was a staff producer at House of Music.
Unless it's a different Jeff, but anyway.
No, there's only one Jeff
Yeah.
Wallach, and there's Jeff, and I remember him doing that vaguely. But a good
Yes.
guy, and
Yeah.
a very good engineer, and I got a lot of respect for him. He didn't get the good raps, you know what I mean? He
As a
didn't
lot of
get it,
people don't. Yeah.
you know, and he's kind of like, but he's a professional, and so he went for it, and then in somewhere in the record, he began to get it, you
Are
know?
you, when you're tracking, are you worried like, oh my goodness, they're like this song could be like a jazz fusion song. This song is like a swing song, like a Benny Goodman. So
Yeah.
this song is like Black Sabbath, you know. So are you worried that they're genre hopping?
Yeah, well, here's what I tried to do. I tried to take all those genres and, try to then meld them in as components of an overall sound, where if you listen to the whole album, you got it. If you listen to one song, it was confusing. But remember,
Yes.
this is hard for people to imagine today, but there was a period when albums were very important. You
Yes.
bought an album, you were either a singles buyer or an album buyer.
Mm-hmm. And you
You
listen to
know,
the whole thing.
you played the whole thing start to finish.
Yep.
And so it was a different approach. You had to engage somebody for 40 minutes and hold their attention. So sequencing was important. The songs were important. So many things are important because you had to hold attention. Now attention span is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Back then it was 45 minutes that you had to different task at hand.
Before our conversation, I was thinking and listening to Tasty and coming up with questions and ways that we can chat about it. And I was just wondering about the genre hopping, but yet the genre hopping is the thing that actually keeps my attention.
Right.
It prevents the ear fatigue. You know,
Yep.
they have instrumentals. I mean, and I'm one of those people as well that I enjoy different whatever it is. You know, I saw Cool and the Gang on your resume, and I'm like, I love Cool and the Gang. I saw you know, so like I love that about the Good Rats
Yeah.
that they can do this. You know.
Yeah. Now you got to understand too, at the same time I'm working with the Good Rats, I'm working with Cool in the Gang. So you
Yeah.
can imagine the dichotomy in my brain about this, and kind of, I worked in so many genres myself, from jazz with John Tropez,
Mhm.
and
I want to circle
as
back to John. I want to
yeah,
circle back to John.
all of these things that I did. Um, I I kind of always wanted myself to be in the background, which is why I've never done an interview. I wanted myself to be in the background and have the music speak for itself and the bands. That was what was important to me. And not me. I didn't care about being famous or about that. I hated name dropping or self promotion. I hated it. And luckily, for whatever reason, I got a reputation very early in New York. So I stayed a mainstay in New York up till I left, and still, I mean, I'm still,
All
most of
right.
my work that I do comes out of New York.
So is this your first interview ever or your first podcast?
This is my first interview I've ever done.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you
I
so
have,
much. I am honored.
I've done, I've been on a couple of radio interviews with the artist. And
Mm-hmm.
so I've kind of been in the background and said a couple of things, but myself, no. Because I didn't want the attention on me and what I did.
Right.
You know, in the end, I relied on the Good Rats, because the Good Rats is one of the few groups that I produced that I did not play a note on.
Oh wow. Okay.
I can't think of another group that I produced that I play on, except the Good Rats. And because their guitar style, where I learned a tremendous amount, it was the first beginning of really flashy guitar, because some of that technically stuff is
It
extremely difficult to play.
it's it's just so you know, I have not yet been flying in musical exemplars in it within my interview. I have not been doing this in my podcast. But all I can say is people have to go and listen to this album.
Yeah.
to fully grasp what you're talking about. Very intricate guitars, groundbreaking harmonies, and everything you're talking about.
And the harmonies in the guitar at the speed in which they're being
Yes.
played,
Yeah.
astounding.
So
But it was endless amounts of guitar recording. I
who
mean,
was the
endless.
technician though? Did Mickey do the most of the parts on the album, or was it split between Mickey and
It was
John?
split between the two.
So
Mickey did most of the harmony stuff he would lay down, but then John the Cat did most of the soloing because John the Cat was an astounding technician. Mickey was more passionate, more articulate, but the flash was John the Cat. I mean, he was at a time when speed guitar was just beginning and Yngwie Malmsteen hadn't appeared yet. And all of a sudden there was this guitar playing that technically is a jazz level, but with Marshalls cranked up.
yeah.
And at this time, remember, people hadn't recorded Marshalls. And recording something that loud, because back then, in order to get the sound, nowadays the amps that can make that sound and you can talk over them.
Yeah.
Back then, the only way to get that sound was to crank the amp all the way up and put the gain on 10 and let it rip. But there are technical issues in recording because microphones at that time couldn't take the sound pressure level. So we had to come up with new ways of recording in order to get that sound.
As you're talking, I'm referencing, bands are crossing my mind. Like you're describing John the Cat's guitar playing, and I'm thinking of Steve Morse with the Dixie Dregs, and you're referencing this and that and the other thing. But these are all bands that came after. After Tasty.
But a lot of these bands were brewing, like Allman Brothers, etc. They existed.
Yes.
They weren't famous. They existed. And how did I know? That's where I was from.
Yeah.
So this Southern rock harmony guitar thing was something I was very aware of and comfortable, though it hadn't broken out. The Southern rocks on Capricorn Records hadn't existed yet. So it was still to come. And later on, I would work with the Allman Brothers and record with them. But because they were
I'd like to talk to you about that as well.
One of my hero bands of all time.
I'm a huge Dickie Betts fan. I can't stop talking about the fact that he brought them, in my opinion, as an outsider, brought them out of the ashes with their number one song as the second guitar player steps up, and nothing more can be said.
He turned it around. He's just what a genius, gentleman genius. I was, believe it or not, very, very close with Butch Trucks. I was very close.
Great drummer.
Yeah, great drummer, great human being, great drummer. Lunatic, like most drummers, they're crazy. But no offense, but you guys are all insane.
That's true.
We admit it. Yes, there's something about being a good drummer. You have to be out of your mind. And but I always related to drummers because I was one of the first people to come up with complex drum miking. Like on Joe Franco's drum kit, I think we used 26 mics.
Yeah.
And this had not been done before because there was, from a technical point of view, there were real issues with phasing when you use multiple miking. It no longer is an issue because you're not cutting vinyl. But when you cut vinyl and records, albums, so when you're mastering, phasing becomes a real critical issue about how you can get certain things recorded. When things are out of phase, then the cutting needle for the lathe that cuts the master for the vinyl would lift up out of the grooves. So keeping things phase coherent when you use multiple mics, very complicated.
And just to break it down for our listeners who may not be familiar with phasing, is this the differential between like a close mic on a tom versus the room mic?
Yeah.
Okay. So.
And also because I mic the top and bottom of the tom.
Oh, nice.
And I would put the bottom mic out of phase to the top mic. I'd use and I used, for the first time, I used crappy mics because I used the mics that would be used live, 57s. Now, nobody did this before.
I love 57s.
Yes, I use 57s because that's what people heard live.
Yeah.
That was what people went to rock shows. That's what drums sounded like to them. Because before that, there would be like two 87s above the kit and then an RE20 shoved in the bass drum with a ton of packing. And I had double bass drums with no packing and live drums. At that point, drums were always dead and they put tape, like basically tampons. They would tape on the drums to deaden them. So
or whole cloth, right?
Yeah, cloth. And I was like, no, Joey, we're not putting anything in your drums. You don't do it live.
I love that.
We're going to record this like drum sound.
Yes.
Now that presented real complicated technical issues.
By the way, those drums sound amazing. Congratulations. And Joe played them fantastically. But the toms sound so crystal clear and they really cut through, yet they're not annoying, and they have depth to them.
Part of the reason they cut through too was the arrangements to leave room for them.
Yeah.
So that you could hear them, because back before that, whenever you had drums, you basically heard a little bit of bass drum. Double bass drum was unheard of. I mean, remember, Vanilla Fudge hasn't yet, Carmen Appice hasn't yet appeared on the scene.
Right.
So double bass drums unheard of, and Joe Franco was amazing and so fast on the double bass drums that when you have two bass drums like that, getting the phasing perfect is critical, especially when they're that fast, that they're so fast that it didn't give most speakers the chance to recover, because the speaker comes in and out to make sound. So it would be so fast. So we had to record them in a way that the timing was such that the speakers could reproduce it.
Right.
Because and back then you couldn't have low energy things like bass drums left and right. They had to be in the center because you couldn't cut it. So
because the speakers couldn't handle it. Am I correct in that?
Yes.
Okay.
The speakers
Gotcha.
they would cancel themselves out. You'd hear nothing. But with Joe's, if you listen on his they're not full left and right, but we split his double bass drums.
So did you mix this? So you're talking about mixing now. So did you mix this as well?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. Everything done right now is music. And
that's so great.
Yeah. Well, it was just us and Jeff Kowalik. It was just us and then I had a lot of support from my partner in the studio at the time, a guy now who's since passed, Charlie Conrad, and he was great moral support. And because it would come down to almost fist fights when you're dealing with this band, you had to be strong in your opinion. I mean, a lot of F-bombs dropped, it was just, Pepe was not about, he had his own mind about what he wanted,
I could tell he was not a politically correct guy. And he spoke his mind, and many people talk about characteristics of this nature as being very admirable. Like someone who speaks their mind, but when you really put it forth in this day and age, you're shunned, right?
Yes.
Or you're a crackpot. This is a guy that just told it to you straight up.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Yeah, and he didn't care the consequences.
Yes.
Didn't matter to him.
So can you tell us about who sung? Because the background vocal arrangements, we haven't even touched on those. Background vocal arrangements are so critical as well, and they're such that they're so good that they can almost be ignored. Like they're so good, but who sung them? Was that all Pepe, or did Mickey sing too?
No, there was Lenny, Pepe.
Oh, Lenny sung too? Okay.
Mickey, those three. And the brilliance about it is that Mickey and Pepe's voices as brothers, they had an uncanny blend of, and we also we multi-tracked those backgrounds,
Right.
you know, where we'd have maybe 8 tracks of background vocals. And, you know, and sometimes we didn't, but sometimes we did. And we spent a lot of time on those harmonies, and the background vocal harmonies were worked out on guitars like guitar harmonies.
I'm cracking up to myself because I'm thinking of the school ups in Fred
Oh,
Upstairs.
oh, let me
You
tell you how
guys
long.
must have had so much fun.
Oh yeah, but to get them right, that was, because that's tough to sing.
Yeah.
It's like, and those, you know, diminished chords, and you know, and I mean,
But
I helped introduce some of those chords to them.
but that sounds like, well, definitely I could see that, but that definitely sounds like a guitar
It's
riff.
guitar.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's a
guitar.
guitar riff.
Yeah.
Um, so you know, we live in an age where you know, producers often talk about comping vocals. What was the vocal take process like? Were these through passes or?
Yeah, Pepe did not do well punching in. He couldn't recapture an emotional thread.
Mm-hmm.
But so he had to sing the whole song. So what we would do is generally I mean, everything could be slightly different. Generally, I'd have him sing it 4 times, and then I'd go in and listen and see if I need to piece it together. But 90% of those vocals are second or third take in their entirety.
Wow.
And even though I was totally open to comping, songwriter is 1 take all the way to the end. And here's what's interesting. Pepe went out there to sing it. Pepe was, let's say he wasn't Justin Timberlake, okay? He was a wild looking man, and very
like a caveman-ish.
caveman-ish, right? Pepe comes out to sing songwriter, walks into the studio completely naked. I'm like, Pepe, what's going on? She says, I want this to be naked. Okay, dude,
I can
go
see
for
it. Wants to be vulnerable.
Yep. And so
What take was that?
1 take, that was the second take.
That was take 2?
Take 1 could have flown as well too, but at the end of second take, his voice cracked at the end.
Mm-hmm.
He actually started to cry. Mm-hmm. And I felt that the beginning of take 1 were slightly better than the beginning of take 2, but I wanted the integrity of that emotional experience. So I went with the attitude that if nobody ever heard take 1, take 2 would be fine at the beginning. So I went and took it all. Some of the stuff, it was comped together. Some of the stuff that you'd think was easy, there was a lot of vocal comping, for example, in Fireball Express, you know, but still he sang the whole song. Once in a while I'd punch him in, and it rarely worked, you know. It just.
I love that. I love that because it's like someone it's as a producer, you've identified the way that this artist works best.
Yes.
And you're not making them conform to, you know, modern technology. This is how they work best. They sing the song from beginning to end, right? Or it's like the band, like a band playing live. If they're used to playing live, maybe they can't track, you know, or maybe they're not good at. Who pitched the strings? Who did the string arrangements? How did those come about?
The strings were, I decided I wanted to put real strings on it. So I worked with a dear friend of mine, a guy named Brian Como. Mm-hmm. And he played the piano on the record, and he did the string arrangements with me. The 2 of us worked on the I write strings as well. And so we both, and I wanted Brian because he was another Italian, New Jersey guy and understood the mentality.
Right. Yes.
And hit it off with them. And his piano playing is brilliant.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. Really
No,
is.
no, and he fit right in with the guitars. He voiced it perfectly.
Well, isn't there a piano solo on Fred Upstairs and
Oh,
Ginger
yeah,
Snappers? Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He plays amazing. He closes out the song, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah. And he plays the Rhapsody in Blue part
Yes.
in Songwriter. And it's like, so
But to the band, was it, they were like, were they open to having strings? Was this,
no,
yeah, exactly.
no,
So tell us
no,
about that. Yeah.
no, 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 they were, no, this is like, no, no, and
Sacrilege.
no. Yeah. And we're not doing this. No. It's like, no, no, you're not going to turn this into Peter, Paul, and Mary. We're not doing it. No, not going to happen. Once they met Brian and they just clicked together, and Brian and Pepe sat and talked about arrangements and piano ideas, and Brian got it all. He's a musical genius, and he got it. And Pepe fell in love with him. Like, what a talent. He became like the Billy Preston of
Right.
was with the Beatles, as Brian was with, and Brian, we called him Guy Como, like Perry Como, he's Guy Como. And once the piano got involved, and it was Brian going to write it with me, they were willing to try it. Well, you can't just try strings because you're hiring 35 people. This is an expensive endeavor.
Yes.
You know what I mean? You don't just go in there and try it. But I found the perfect musical director for the orchestra. I hired a guy named Kermit Moore. Once again, a super talented cellist and super talented. And nobody tried putting strings on heavy rock and roll.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it really works so wonderfully, but it sticks out, you know.
But there's an issue that comes to it, that guitars can never be perfectly in tune because the way that they are built, they can't be perfectly in tune. They're fourths for four strings and third. This is music theory, but they're fourths for most strings, but then there's a third in there between the G and the B, and it's like, and then it goes to fourths again, which means that it can't ever be, the B string can never be totally in tune, and the low E string can't either, because when you bar it, you put your finger on it to press it down, it'll make it a little sharp. It makes the guitar sound like it does. It makes that sort of beating sound that makes heavy guitars so fantastic. But strings have to be right in tune. Okay. So, and the tuning at that time was by ear. There weren't tuners.
Concertmaster would play an A.
Yeah. And for me, I was the concertmaster. I'd tune up guitars in the studio. Here we go. I had a piano in there, and we tuned to that piano, and that became central. And then, you know, I had pretty good pitch on it. Mickey had incredible pitch for tuning. Mickey, he's the unsung hero, genius guitars. So the strings, once they were done, the band was totally supportive of breaking that new ground. You know?
And this was an overdub. So did the band track all those orchestrations with piano? I mean, as a reference, I mean, how did you lay out, or are you muting things in the mix to get the orchestrations, or?
No, I heard and knew what I wanted for the string parts from the beginning. So we arranged it that. So prior to getting strings done, which was done at the very end of the record, the songs sound like there were these holes in them, you know? And the band didn't have the same imagination as I did. They always wanted to fill up those holes, you know? Right. They wanted to fill. So, because I've always been a producer that I like to record what I want to be on the record. I don't record more. Here's what I want to be on the record.
Right.
So I don't do a lot of, when I'm mixing for somebody else, a lot of arrangements, muting, etc. But when I'm my own production, I kind of hear from the beginning. When I start recording, I hear a finished record, and I'm just filling in the blanks. But I always hear it finished. Yeah, and then with the Good Rats, after we went from the first record, there was more faith for the second record and so on. And we continued. And here's something real important about the Good Rats. So I worked on, I guess it's 5 records. I never made a dime from the Good Rats. Not a dime.
And that's because of studio time, because of album sales, because of what? Like
album sales, the way that recoupment happened back then, and recoupment is the record company's way of stealing from bands.
Mm-hmm.
So, marketing dollars got recouped, lots of stuff. We sold records,
right?
But the band didn't get royalties either. They got an advance I got them an advance for Tasty. So they had that, but they made their money live. They made some money later on as we made better deals with the different smaller distribution, because at a certain point they were on, what's the record company?
Passport?
No, not Passport. Passport was Marty Scott.
Gem?
Gem was part of Marty Scott and Passport. Before that, they were on with Platinum Records, the distribution. And that was Joe and Sylvia Robinson, and they were the Black Mafia. Mm-hmm. So here we are in this black label, this phenomenal woman, Barbara Baker, and Joe Robinson, they were like astounded by the soul that Pepe had in his singing.
And that was Rat City in Blue, right?
Yeah.
Was that on Platinum?
Yeah.
So they got it.
They got it.
And I'm like,
what? And it happened weird. Sylvia, who had a big hit called Pillow Talk, that I did with her. Yes. She was recording that song in my studio, and she was in one room, and I had the Good Rats in the other room, and she heard, and she's like, "What?" I said, "It's hard rock, the Rats. That's not rock and roll. That's soul." And so she went and told her husband Joe, and then we in a meeting, and lo and behold, record number 2.
Was that a New Jersey label?
Yes,
Englewood. Englewood. Gosh, there was so much music happening in Englewood with who is it? All those jazz records were recorded at
Rudy Van Gelder Studio. Yeah, Rudy Van Gelder Studio. Yep.
Oh my goodness, with CTI Records. Remember them?
Yep. Oh yeah, Creed Taylor. Yep. Yeah, me and my studio in West Orange, we were all like this. This
infamous
little music mafia that we were stuck together, and it was a center. New Jersey was generating some serious music. I did the very first demo that John Bon Jovi did ever, in a group called The Rest, and I produced Southside Johnny, and I Tight with Springsteen and and Kool and the Gang. We had to be tight together.
And my favorite Jack Bruce record.
Oh yeah,
with Billy Cobham.
Yep. Yeah, that was a special record. Jack was a special friend of mine. I got to do that record, and I got to do the BLT record, Bruce Lord and Trower.
Right. It's a very soulful album, that Jack Bruce and Friends record.
Oh yeah, that was very soulful, very special record. Jack and I had always wanted to work together. I knew him from Cream days, and I knew Eric, and I knew all of them well, and they kind of loved hearing me play, Eric, because I was playing all this crazy country shit, dulcimers and all this, and so they'd come over from England, and they had stopped in to Gertie's Folk City while they were playing at the Cafe A Go-Go, and I was playing behind everybody. Mm-hmm. Like I was just the guitar player to accompany. So you'd have Bob Dylan come on for a minute, and then Joan Baez, and I was the one guy just stayed up on stage. And the session guitar players were just becoming something where you had session guitar players playing by ear. Before that, session guitar players read a chart.
Right.
And then music started to become more by ear rather than by charts. And so I was by ear, and I remember seeing these 3 crazy English guys come in, and at the end they want to talk to me, it was Jack and Eric and Ginger, and Jack and I became friends then. It's before the first Cream record had come out. We became friends. Eric and I, we connected, but there was competitive guitar thing going on.
Mm-hmm.
And so Jack and I, we stayed friends forever. And then out of the blue, after Cream, he called me and said, I want to make a record with you. So we talked about what we wanted to do. I introduced him to Billy Cobham.
Great. He's great on that record.
Yep. And everybody was great on that record. David Sanchez.
Sanchez from E Street Band.
Yep. You know your people. He's a friend of mine, and just great, all great people. Great people.
We have a lot to talk about. Should we do a part 2? And
let's do a part 2, because I actually have a session, and I thought this would be very awkward. You've made me feel so comfortable because we're just having a conversation.
This is so great.
I just, and you know so much. You're so aware, like you're this whole soul. But you know what? I got to tell you something. This is not to blow smoke up your butt, but I have found that drummers are the most musical of musicians. And
we'd like to think so.
I'll never publicly acknowledge that I just called you a musician. I'll never acknowledge that.
Cymbal crash in the background.
Yeah, that doesn't happen, because I always say that drummers are these animals you kept in cages and fed raw meat to and let out once in a while to play, because the crazier the person, the better the drum. But drummers had to assume a unique musicality, because their method of communication of what they did was really different from what all of us who are playing harmonics of it. So you guys had to be aware of all the percussion rhythm, but also the harmonics. Because it wasn't until I really started working the drummers, how you tune your drums and how to fit in with the group. All of that stuff became critical. And I learned a lot of that from working with Joe Franco, because for that,
drummer,
and who I'd never seen 6 tom-toms in a set and 2 bass drums.
Yeah.
Like, do you ever play double bass?
I dabble with it. I have a double pedal.
You do?
Yeah. So but it's a different animal.
Yeah, it is. And the double pedals are very different than the double bass drums.
Yes.
There's a different mechanical response. You can't get the same speed. You can't. Then you got to adapt your whole world to play 2 bass drums, because they're awkwardly played. You know what I mean? You're not.
Yes.
It's not a normal situation.
We have to pick it up here, and we have to. I would love to do a part 2 where we kind of wrap up Tasty, and then go into Rat City, and if there's time, I could talk endlessly about Rat City and Birth Comes to Us All as well. And I'd like to talk about the mood of the band and in between albums, and working toward the pre-production on the next one and so on. So if you're up for it, we can do another.
Let's do it.
If I'm not moving, but like maybe next weekend or so.
Yeah, you let me know what's available. I'm going to be around. I've got some heavy sessions this week. And then, but I should be available again next weekend and the mornings or whatever is good. But get yourself moved, and I'm at your convenience, because this is kind of fun, and it's great to be able to talk music, because it's obviously your passion and my passion is music.
Absolutely.
Now, what do you teach in school? What grade?
Well, I've done both general education, so I am currently a classroom teacher. I'm a 5th grade teacher. But I'm also licensed in music, K-12 music, and I've taught music so of my 20 years of public school teaching, I've done 10 in the classroom and 10 as a music teacher.
You've been a general
music teacher. Yeah.
How incredible is that? Now, see, that's something I want to talk to you about, because to me, it's shameful what's been done to budgets as far as music in schools. It's shameful.
Well, we can talk. We don't even have enough time, because I scrambled all summer. I got laid off of one district who cut 30% of their music budget, and so 30% of their teachers. And so it's the one medium where, or it's the one discipline that gives that all educators pay lip service to, like, everybody, children need music. They're going to, not everybody responds to math. But the second they can cut it out of the budget, they will.
I know. Believe me,
So
I have done more campaigning for music in schools than you can imagine with Anaris and with all
yes,
this. It's a real important thing for me is to get money for music in school because I do think it can save kids' lives.
it really can. I mean, if it weren't for music, I wouldn't be this passionate about anything.
And if it
it seems,
wasn't for
if,
music, I wouldn't be alive.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Music got me through. It saved me from drugs. It saved me from being a juvenile delinquent. It gave me an opportunity for this little Southern boy to get to New York and have a career. And here I am. And I'll say it, I'm 71 years old, and I'm
Great.
still doing this. Is so incredible
So
to me,
great.
you know. And I don't feel an age disparity when I talk to other musicians.
No.
Like I don't think you're some youngster, and I hope you don't think that I'm grandpa.
No.
Talking about this, it's like this is what makes music incredible because it crosses age, it crosses culture, crosses color. It's the universal language. It crosses language, you know, and to cut it out,
it's horrible.
No.
Well, you got me going because I always feel like we can wrap up I'd like to wrap up by making a point that I always feel like I've missed when I speak to other musicians that I've missed entire swaths of music history. Like somebody will say like, oh, you don't know that Stooges record? And I'll be like, no, I don't. Oh, darn it. I missed that. Oh, you don't know this, this Dave Bromberg record? I'm like, oh, darn it. I don't. So I'm always going back. I'm always like,
Now, wait, I got to stop you there.
flipping through.
I got to stop you there. Played with Stooges, played with Dave Brownback. I can't believe you bring
There you go.
You talk about disparate.
Well, when you said mandolin.
It's like, yeah, I did. I played I played mandola.
Okay.
And mandola is like a viola to a violin.
Right.
It's a mandolin, mandola. And I also played mandocello, which is like the cello version, the bigger version. But yeah, I played mandola with Dave Bromberg and then played guitar with the Stooges because they had problems. I've ghosted guitars on hundreds of records, hundreds.
Oh, Mike. Well,
Yeah.
we're gonna pick it up. I want to thank you so much for visiting with us, and we're gonna do a part 2. And you know what?
Thank
there might
you,
even,
my
there might even be a
brother.
part
I have
3.
a newfound brother. I have a new brother in music.
Yes,
Thank
indeed.
you. And call me this week and we'll get set up. And good luck with the move.
Thank you so much, Stephan.
And tell your wife she has to stay in this new house at least 1 year. At least 1 year.
I'll try and keep her feet on the ground.
Yeah, and I don't want you moving for at least a year. It's too stressful. All right, thank you, brother.
Take care, Stephan.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, great meeting you. Bye-bye.